Kai, if he plays that old wreck, I'll kneel right here and polish the stage myself. The director's booming laugh echoed through the dusty hall, a challenge thrown not just at the frail boy on the bench, but at every impossible dream that had ever dared to whisper hope in a forgotten place. This story delves into the profound, unexpected connections forged in the crucible of adversity, where a single unheard melody could ignite a movement. It's about a small town clinging to its past, a young man fighting for a future, and the powerful, unseen currents of fate that can transform a dismissive jest into a moment of collective awakening, forcing a community to confront its own biases and discover the true meaning of belonging. Now, before we dive deeper, please subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. And drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you so much. And now, let's get back to the story. If he plays that old wreck, I'll kneel right here and polish the stage myself. The words, thick with cynical amusement, sliced through the quiet tension of the old mill playhouse, echoing off the high, water-stained ceilings and rattling the few remaining loose window panes. Silas Thorne, director of the town council's arts committee, a title he wore with a perpetually slumped shoulder and a weary sigh, had barely bothered to glance at the boy. His gaze was fixed instead on the ancient, upright piano-positioned center stage, its ivory keys yellowed and chipped like decaying teeth, its once gleaming mahogany now dulled by decades of neglect and dust. The instrument had seen better days, probably even better centuries, and it stood as a silent, hulking testament to the fading glory of Harmony Creek. Harmony Creek. The name itself felt like a cruel joke these days. Once a bustling mill town, its rhythm had been set by the churning of the river and the steady hum of industry. Now, the mills were silent. The river flowed largely unnoticed, and the only rhythm left was the slow, melancholic tick of time counting down to the next closure, the next departure. The old mill playhouse, built with the dreams and sweat of the town's founders, was next on the chopping block. Unless, of course, something, a miracle perhaps, could breathe new life into its crumbling walls. Clara Davies felt Silas Thorne's dismissive laughter like a physical blow. She stood in the dim light of the auditorium's aisle, her hands clasped tightly, her heart a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. Elias, the boy on stage, seemed to shrink further under the weight of Thorne's scorn. He was barely 16, slight of build, with eyes that held a quiet wisdom far beyond his years, and a shy demeanor that belied an inner strength Clara had only glimpsed. She had found him by the riverbank a few weeks ago, drawing intricate patterns in the mud with a twig, humming a melody that had snagged her heart and refused to let go. He was one of the many new faces in Harmony Creek, part of the families who had arrived from a place she only knew as somewhere far away and broken, seeking refuge, seeking a fresh start in a town that wasn't entirely sure it had one to offer. Clara, a vibrant young woman who taught music at the dwindling community school, saw not just a boy, but a spark. She saw the potential for connection, for understanding, for a way to bridge the widening chasm between the old residents and the new. She believed Elias could save the playhouse, not with grand speeches or petitions, but with the universal language of music. The town council had given her one last chance to present a viable community program that could justify keeping the playhouse open. And her program hinged entirely on Elias and his music. Silas, please. Clara's voice was soft, but firm, cutting through his continued chuckles. Give him a chance. You haven't even heard him. Silas finally turned, his gaze sweeping over Clara with a practiced weariness. He'd known Clara since she was a little girl, a bright-eyed prodigy who'd once filled this very hall with the joyous sounds of her own piano. Now she was fighting for a lost cause, much like him, only she hadn't given up hope yet. "Clara, sweetheart," he sighed, running a hand over his thinning hair. "Look at it. Look at him. It's a waste of time. The keys are practically falling off. The pedals are rusted solid. Even if he were the next Beethoven, that thing wouldn't produce a single decent note. We need a real plan, not this." He gestured vaguely at Elias, who sat with his shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed on his own worn sneakers. Elias felt the heat of their conversation, the unspoken accusations, the profound skepticism. He understood. He had seen the indifference in the eyes of many townspeople, felt the chill of their distrust. He knew what they saw: a quiet, skinny boy, an outsider sitting before a relic that symbolized all that was broken in their town. What could he possibly offer? But then he thought of the melody, the one that Clara had heard by the river, the one that lived deep inside him, a song born of both sorrow and stubborn hope. It was his grandmother's lullaby, a melody carried across oceans, across hardship, a whisper of resilience passed down through generations. He lifted his hands, his fingers trembling slightly. The old keys felt cold, rough beneath his fingertips. He imagined the dust motes dancing in the shafts of light that pierced the high windows, illuminating the ghosts of performances past. The air smelled of aged wood, forgotten dreams, and a faint, lingering scent of mildew. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic flutter in his chest. This wasn't just about him, or even the playhouse. It was about something bigger, something unspoken. It was about proving that new life could sprout from old decay, that beauty could emerge from unexpected places, that a voice, however quiet, could resonate and change everything. He looked at Clara, who offered him a small, encouraging smile, her eyes conveying a quiet faith that steadied his nerves. Then he looked at Silas, whose arms were now crossed, a look of resigned defeat mixed with a hint of challenge on his face. This was it, the moment of truth. Elias closed his eyes for a brief second, clearing his mind of the whispers of doubt, of the weight of expectations. He thought of his grandmother's hands, gnarled with age but still capable of weaving intricate tapestries. He thought of her stories, of a homeland far away, of perseverance. He pressed his foot gently against the rusted pedal, surprised when it gave a faint, protesting creak. Then his fingers, slender and surprisingly strong, descended upon the keys. The first note that escaped the old piano wasn't a grand, resonant chord. It was a hesitant, slightly out-of-tune C, thin and reedy. A collective sigh, almost imperceptible, swept through the sparse audience of council members and curious onlookers. Silas Thorne let out a quiet, knowing huff. But then, Elias didn't stop. His fingers moved with a sudden, fluid grace, finding a rhythm, coaxing a melody from the decrepit instrument. The next notes, then a cascade of them, began to weave together, hesitant no longer. They were fragile, yes, but undeniably beautiful, a sound that seemed to transcend the physical limitations of the piano itself. It wasn't the powerful, classical piece they might have expected. It was something else entirely. Something ancient and new, melancholic and yet brimming with an undeniable, profound hope. It was a melody that tugged at the heartstrings, unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting. A hush fell over the playhouse, deeper than before. Silas Thorne's cynical smirk slowly began to falter. his eyes widening almost imperceptibly as the unfamiliar, hauntingly beautiful notes filled the space. The melody was raw, pure, and utterly captivating, building in a quiet crescendo. It spoke of journey, of loss, and of finding strength where none was expected. It resonated with the unspoken anxieties and dormant hopes of Harmony Creek itself. Elias played on, lost in the music, his eyes still closed, a faint, almost ethereal smile gracing his lips. The sound was not just notes, it was a story being told, a prayer whispered into the silence. And as the melody swelled, gaining confidence and depth, Silas Thorne felt an unfamiliar prickling at the back of his eyes. He realized, with a jolt that went through him like an electric current, that the music wasn't just beautiful, it was familiar. Not in its specific notes, but in its very essence, its pain and its enduring spirit. It was the sound of his own town, echoing back to him through the hands of a boy he had dismissed, played on an instrument he had declared dead. He found himself slowly, almost unconsciously, unfolding his arms. The music was telling a story, and Silas, for the first time in a long time, found himself desperate to hear how it would end. The final note hung in the air, a delicate, almost mournful whisper that resonated long after Elias's hands had fallen still from the keys. It was a sound that seemed to gather every unspoken sorrow, every forgotten dream of Harmony Creek, and then, slowly, offer a sliver of solace. The silence that followed wasn't merely the absence of music. It was a profound, breathless stillness, heavy with the weight of raw emotion and dawning understanding. Silas Thorne stood frozen, his arms no longer crossed, his earlier cynical scoff a distant, embarrassing memory. He blinked, the faint prickling at his eyes a testament to the unexpected invasion of sentiment. He found himself looking at Elias not as a shy, unfamiliar boy, but as an oracle, a vessel through which the forgotten heart of his town had finally found its voice. The melody had stirred something deep within him, something he hadn't known was dormant. The echoes of his own youth, of a time when the playhouse wasn't a relic, but a vibrant core of the community, pulsating with life and laughter. He remembered his own mother, her hand guiding his through the aisles, her eyes alight with the magic of a stage production. It was a world he had long since written off, a chapter he believed irrevocably closed. Yet here, now, in this dusty hall, a fragile new melody was playing. Councilwoman Eleanor Vance, known for her sharp tongue and even sharper business acumen, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Even Mayor Jenkins, perpetually distracted by his phone, had slowly lowered it, his gaze fixed, surprisingly rapt, on Elias. But not everyone was swayed. Across the aisle, Councilman Sterling Finch, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with disapproval, cleared his throat loudly. "A lovely little performance, I suppose?" Finch began, his voice laced with patronizing dismissal. "But sentimentality won't pay the heating bills, Silas, or fix that decrepit roof. We're here to discuss the future of this property, not to enjoy a quaint serenade." He glanced pointedly at the antique piano. "That instrument belongs in a museum, and frankly, so does this entire building." The spell was broken, shattered by the cold, hard logic of finances. Elias, who had slowly opened his eyes, flinched, the fragility of his moment exposed. Clara rushed to his side, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Her eyes, however, were locked on Finch, a fire flickering in their depths. Silas, however, felt a different kind of fire ignite. The anger at Finch's dismissiveness mingled with a nascent protectiveness over Elias and the burgeoning hope the boy's music had kindled. "Sterling, with all due respect, Silas began, his voice steadier than he expected. What we just heard wasn't quaint. It was transformative. This isn't just about a building, it's about a community, about what we can offer our new residents, our children, about connecting them to our town, to its heart. Finch scoffed. A concert hall isn't a community center, Silas, and these new residents, as you call them, need jobs and housing, not another place for fanciful dreams. We have a solid offer on the table. A developer wants to buy the playhouse, tear it down, and build a modern community recreation center. Basketball courts, a fitness gym, perhaps even a new library wing. Something tangible, something useful. Clara gasped. A recreation center? The thought of the old playhouse with its peeling paint and creaking floorboards, its echoes of a century of stories, being replaced by a sterile concrete box, sent a chill through her. But the playhouse is a community center, Councilman. It can be. With a proper program, with music, with theater, it can offer something no gym ever could. A space for expression, for culture, for emotional connection. And who, Finch challenged, his eyes narrowed, is going to fund this expression? We're already stretched thin. Harmony Creek can't afford luxuries. The room buzzed with nervous whispers. Finch had a point, a brutally practical one. Harmony Creek was struggling, and while Elias's music had touched hearts, it hadn't magically conjured a budget. Mayor Jenkins, clearing his throat, finally spoke. Silas, Clara, we appreciate the passion. And young Elias, that was truly unexpected. But Sterling is right. We have a developer who's willing to invest significantly in a new facility, one that addresses real community needs. Silas felt a familiar wave of defeat threaten to engulf him. He'd been down this road too many times. But then he looked at Elias, still on stage, his small frame radiating a quiet vulnerability, and then at Clara. Her chin lifted in defiance. He thought of that haunting melody and the raw, unvarnished truth it held. He couldn't let it die. Not now. Mayor, council members, Silas said, stepping forward, his voice gaining strength. That music wasn't just pretty. It was a story of resilience, of hope, of finding beauty in difficult circumstances. That is the story of Harmony Creek itself. That is the story of our new families, who have come here seeking safety and a fresh start. We can't simply tear down our history and replace it with something generic. We have a chance, right now, to fuse the old with the new. To make this playhouse a symbol of our town's rebirth. A place where everyone, old resident and new, can find their voice. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Clara has developed a proposal, a community music and arts program, drawing on the talents of everyone, especially our newest members. Elias is just one example of the incredible potential living right here among us. We could renovate this place, not into some extravagant theater, but into a practical, welcoming space. A place for lessons, for open mic nights, for cultural exchanges. A place where Harmony Creek can truly find its harmony again. Mayor Jenkins exchanged a look with Councilwoman Vance, a silent communication passing between them. Finch, however, scoffed again. Sounds expensive and entirely unproven. This developer's offer is a sure thing. $1 million for the property, plus a commitment to build a state-of-the-art facility within 18 months. $1 million. The number hung in the air, a formidable obstacle. Elias, hearing it, finally looked up, his face etched with a mix of awe and renewed despair. How could a simple melody compete with such a sum? Silas knew he was battling a force greater than just Finch's cynicism. He was battling the seductive promise of an easy solution, of a quick fix. But he couldn't back down. He looked at Clara, then back at Elias. "Give us 3 months," Silas pleaded, his voice now laced with urgency. "Just 3 months to prove this can work. Let us launch Clara's program. Let Elias share his gift. Let us show this town and this council, that music, that community, that shared human experience is worth far more than a developer's check." The mayor hesitated, looking at the faces of his council. The split was clear. Some swayed by the performance, others by Finch's practicality. He knew a decision had to be made, and soon. The town was waiting. "All right, Silas," Mayor Jenkins finally said, his voice slow, measured. 3 months, but it comes with a condition. We need to see concrete results, attendance numbers, community engagement, and most importantly, we need to see a clear path to self-sufficiency. No more relying on the town budget. And if you fail..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The playhouse would be sold. The wrecking ball would come. Elias's music, Clara's dreams, Silas's newfound conviction, all would be swept away. Silas felt a thrill of fear, quickly replaced by a surge of determined resolve. This wasn't just a challenge. It was a gamble for the soul of Harmony Creek. He looked at Elias, whose eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. The real work, the real fight, had just begun. The 3 months stretched before them like an impassable chasm, demanding a leap of faith Harmony Creek hadn't dared in decades. For Silas, the mayor's conditional approval felt less like a victory and more like a fuse lit on a ticking bomb. He understood the stakes intimately. This wasn't just about saving an old building. It was about confronting the very spirit of cynicism that had choked the life out of his town, piece by painful piece. And the burden of proving that spirit wrong, that music could genuinely heal, rested squarely on his, Clara's, and Elias's shoulders. The very next morning, the reality of their challenge hit with the force of a physical blow. Silas arrived at the playhouse, a coffee cup cold in his hand, to find the main doors padlocked. A notice, crisp and white, was taped to the old wood. Temporarily closed for safety inspection. Harmony Creek Building Authority. He knew Finch's hand was in this, a transparent tactic to derail their momentum, to declare the playhouse unsafe before they even had a chance to begin. The old building, already a ghost of its former self, seemed to sigh under the additional weight of bureaucracy. Clara joined him minutes later, her face etched with a mix of fury and despair. "This is Sterling, isn't it?" She spat, rattling the padlock with impotent rage. "He's trying to starve us out before we even plant a seed." "Of course it's him," Silas grumbled, kicking a loose stone with a frustrated grunt. "Standard operating procedure for Finch. Cut off the oxygen supply. We have a 3-month deadline, and now we can't even get inside our own venue." He looked at the playhouse, its windows dark, reflecting the gray morning sky. It looked less like a potential beacon and more like a tomb. How are we supposed to launch a program, attract an audience, or even clean this place if we're locked out? Elias appeared moments later, his bicycle leaning against the rusted lamppost, his face pale. He'd heard the news filtering through the small town's grapevine. He saw the padlock, the notice, and the defeated slump of Silas's shoulders. His quiet confidence from the previous day had evaporated, replaced by a familiar shadow of hopelessness. I can't play if I can't get in," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper, the simple statement carrying the weight of all their fading hopes. No, Elias. Don't you dare give up. Clara gripped his arm, her eyes blazing with a fierce resolve. This is exactly what they want, to make us believe it's hopeless. But it's not. We'll find a way. Silas, catching Clara's unwavering gaze, felt a spark reignite within him. She was right. Finch wouldn't win this easily. Okay, new plan, he declared, pushing aside his despair. If they won't let us in the front, we'll find another way to make music. We'll take the music to the people. We'll bring the playhouse spirit to the streets of Harmony Creek. Clara's eyes lit up. The town square, the old bandstand. Perfect, Silas nodded, a grim smile forming. It's falling apart, but it's outside council jurisdiction, for now. Elias, can you play without a piano? Elias hesitated, then slowly nodded. I can play the melodies. My grandmother taught me. They are in my head, my heart. He pulled a small, worn wooden flute from his backpack, an intricately carved instrument that looked as ancient as the playhouse itself. I can play this. It's not a piano, but it's perfect, Clara interjected, her voice filled with a renewed sense of purpose. It's portable. It's personal. It's you. We'll start there. We'll call it Harmony Unplugged, a pop-up concert series, a taste of what we can do, even without the building. The next few weeks were a blur of frantic activity and frustrating setbacks. Silas, using his limited political capital, managed to arrange a temporary permit for the town square bandstand, enduring Finch's sneering pronouncements about begging for loose change. Clara worked tirelessly, spreading the word, contacting local musicians, and trying to mobilize the town's fragmented art community. But Harmony Creek was a town built on routine, and the idea of street performances, especially featuring an unknown, quiet boy playing an unfamiliar instrument, was met with lukewarm interest at best and outright suspicion at worst. Their first Harmony Unplugged performance was a dismal affair. Elias, sitting on a rickety stool on the neglected bandstand, played his melodies to a handful of curious onlookers, mostly Clara's students and a few bewildered elderly residents who had wandered by. The wooden flute sang its poignant, beautiful songs, but the sounds were swallowed by the vast emptiness of the square, overshadowed by the distant rumble of traffic and the indifferent chatter of passers-by. Elias's heart sank with each unfinished melody. He saw the polite smiles, the quick exits, and the growing disappointment in Clara's eyes. It's not enough, Elias confessed to Clara later that evening, his voice heavy with despair. They sat on a park bench, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. They don't understand the music. It's different. Clara wrapped an arm around his shoulders. It's not that they don't understand, Elias. It's that they haven't truly listened. Not yet. This town has been quiet for so long, it's forgotten how to listen. But your music, it's too beautiful to be ignored. She knew he was right, though. The small, intimate scale of the flute's melodies, while deeply moving, wasn't enough to ignite a movement. Not in a town this jaded. They needed a bigger sound, a bolder statement, something that would grab Harmony Creek by the shoulders and force it to pay attention. Silas, meanwhile, was fighting his own battles. The building authority, clearly nudged by Finch, was dragging its feet on the playhouse inspection, citing endless bureaucratic hurdles. Every phone call ended in a polite but firm refusal. Time was slipping away, and the mayor's conditional approval felt more like a slow-motion rejection. One afternoon, a week before their deadline, a desperate idea sparked in Silas's mind. He had been looking at old photographs of Harmony Creek, Pictures from a time when the playhouse thrived, when the mill was roaring, when life here was full of vibrant energy. He saw a picture of a marching band, parading through the town square, instruments gleaming, smiles wide. A brass band. That was it. That was the sound they needed. Bold, undeniable, impossible to ignore. He rushed to Clara, bursting into her small office at the community school. "A band! We need a band, Clara! Not just Elias's flute, but a full, booming Harmony Creek band. Something that will shake this town awake." Clara looked at him, surprised. "Silas, where are we going to find a band? We barely have a functioning music department. Most of the instruments are gathering dust in storage. And rehearsing? We still can't get into the playhouse." "We'll make one," Silas declared, his eyes alight with a renewed, almost reckless determination. "We'll get all the old instruments out, dust them off. We'll find musicians, old ones, new ones, anyone who can play a note, and we'll rehearse outside. In the square, in the park, in the church hall, if we have to. We need a sound that screams Harmony Creek is alive, vibrant, and united." But as the days dwindled, the task felt insurmountable. Finding enough functional instruments was a logistical nightmare, and finding enough musicians, especially new residents who might have musical talents but were too shy or intimidated to come forward, felt like searching for needles in a haystack. The town remained largely indifferent, wrapped in its comfortable cocoon of apathy. Their last Harmony Unplugged session in the square saw even fewer attendees, a stark reminder of their dwindling chances. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty town square, Elias sat alone on the bandstand, his flute silent in his hands. He watched the remaining few lights flicker on in the distant homes, each one a universe unto itself, seemingly unaware or uncaring of the struggle unfolding in the heart of their town. He knew the deadline was approaching fast, their 3 months almost over. He also knew his quiet flute, however beautiful, wasn't enough. He looked at the playhouse, a dark silhouette against the deepening twilight, its padlock a stark, gleaming symbol of their impending failure. He saw the ghost of Harmony Creek, not just in the old building, but in the indifference of its people. And then, he remembered a story his grandmother had told him, a tale of a hidden song, a melody so powerful it could awaken a sleeping village. A song that needed not just a musician, but an instrument capable of unleashing its full force. He clutched his flute, but his gaze drifted past the locked playhouse to the distant abandoned mill where his family now lived, to a sound he had heard only once, a sound that resonated deep within him, a sound that could change everything. He knew where the real music was. He just needed to figure out how to bring it to life. Elias knew the truth that night. The quiet whispers of his flute, however beautiful, were not enough to shake a town from its slumber. Harmony Creek needed a roar, a crescendo that would resonate with its very foundation. And as he stared at the dark silhouette of the old mill playhouse, his gaze shifted beyond it, to the hulking, abandoned textile mill that had given the town its name and its purpose. It was a ruin, yes, but for Elias, it was also where his family found shelter, and where he had once heard a sound, a rhythm, that had imprinted itself on his soul. He remembered the old man, one of the original mill workers, who still lingered around the skeletal remains of the factory, a ghost haunting his past. Elias had seen him, a stoic figure, tracing patterns on the massive rusted gears, humming a tune that matched the rhythmic pulse of the machinery that once dominated their lives. He had called it the heartbeat of Harmony Creek. That was it. That was the instrument. Not a piano, not a flute, but the very pulse of the town itself. The next morning, under a sky heavy with the promise of rain, Elias confided his audacious idea to Clara. "The mill," he whispered, his eyes alight with an uncharacteristic intensity. "The machines, the sounds, they are music." Clara looked at him, bewildered. "Elias, the mill hasn't run in 20 years. Those machines are dead. They're just rusted metal and silent gears." "They just need to be awakened," Elias insisted, a stubborn set to his jaw. "The old man, Mr. Henderson, he knows. He knows how to make them sing again." He saw the skepticism in Clara's eyes, but also a flicker of curiosity. She had seen the magic Elias could conjure. Perhaps this was just another form of it. Silas, when they approached him with the proposal, nearly choked on his coffee. "The mill? Elias, sweetheart, that's insane. It's condemned. It's dangerous. And even if it weren't, how do you make music from grinding gears and rusty levers?" "It's the rhythm, Silas," Clara explained, catching Elias's vision, albeit faintly. "The pulse of the town. We're struggling to find musicians for a band. But what if the mill itself becomes our orchestra? Its history, its power. Imagine the impact." She saw the doubt in Silas's eyes, the impossible weight of their rapidly approaching deadline, but also a desperate glimmer of hope. They had nothing left to lose. Silas sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right," he said, the word heavy with a mixture of resignation and daring. "Against my better judgment, I'm listening. But how do we even get in there? The mill is private property, and even more locked down than the playhouse." Clara had an answer. "Mr. Henderson, Elias says he knows the mill better than anyone. He worked there for 50 years. If anyone can get us in and show us how to make it sing, it's him." Finding Mr. Henderson wasn't difficult. He was exactly where Elias predicted, sitting on an overturned bucket outside the mill's main gate, his gaze fixed on the derelict structure as if willing it back to life. He was a man of few words, his face a roadmap of hard labor and quiet grief for a bygone era. When Elias, with Clara and Silas by his side, explained their wild idea, Henderson listened, his eyes, initially wary, slowly softening as Elias spoke of the mill's rhythm, its heartbeat. "The machine's got souls," Henderson finally rasped, his voice like sandpaper. "If you know how to listen." He looked at Elias, a flicker of something akin to recognition passing between the old man and the young boy. "Your grandmother? She told you about the songs of the looms, didn't she, boy?" Elias nodded, surprised. "She said they sang a lament, but also a song of hope." Henderson gave a rare, faint smile. "Aye, hope. The mill always had hope." He pulled a massive, ancient key from his pocket, its metal dulled by age. "Come on, then. But you break anything, you answer to me." Inside, the mill was a cathedral of forgotten industry. Dust motes danced in the sparse light filtering through grimy windows. The air hung heavy with the smell of rust and decaying fabric. Massive, silent looms stretched like prehistoric beasts, their metallic bones exposed. It was a place of ghosts, a stark reminder of Harmony Creek's decline. Silas felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. This wasn't music. It was a graveyard. "Here." Henderson pointed to a massive loom, its intricate mechanisms rusted and seized. This was the big one, made the finest wool in the valley. It had a rhythm that vibrated through the whole building. You could feel it in your bones. Elias, however, wasn't deterred. He moved through the cavernous space with a dancer's grace, his fingers tracing the cold metal, his ears seemingly attuned to sounds only he could hear. He tapped a loose pipe, listened to the hollow echo. He ran his hand over a vast metal sheet, and it produced a deep, resonant hum. Clara watched him, mesmerized, seeing how he intuitively understood the latent music within the seemingly inanimate objects. For the next 2 weeks, under Henderson's gruff but increasingly supportive guidance, and with Silas's reluctant but critical logistical help, the mill became their secret rehearsal space. It was a perilous undertaking. Some parts of the floorboards were unstable, tools were rusted, and the air was thick with ancient dust. They moved with caution, but with a fierce determination. Henderson, with an almost magical touch, managed to free rusted gears, oil squeaking joints, and coax life back into long dormant components. He explained the intricate dance of the machines, how each part contributed to a larger rhythmic whole. Elias, with his keen ear and innate sense of rhythm, became the conductor of this industrial orchestra. He found a way to use the massive looms to create a percussive beat, tapping on their metallic frames with specific mallets and sticks, creating a deep, resonant pulse. Clara, inspired, began experimenting with other sounds: the ringing of discarded pipes, the eerie echo of an empty metal vat, the clanging of chains, the rhythmic scraping of large pulleys. They discovered the mill was a symphony waiting to be played, a cacophony of industrial sounds that, when arranged and timed, formed a powerful, almost primal musical experience. But the sheer scale of the mill's sounds, while impressive, was also overwhelming. It lacked the human element, the melodic heart. That's where Elias's flute came in. He began to weave his delicate, haunting melodies through the booming, percussive landscape of the mill. The contrast was breathtaking, the ancient, industrial rhythm providing a powerful foundation for the fragile, soulful song of the flute. It was the story of Harmony Creek, old and new, raw and refined, powerful and vulnerable, all at once. As their deadline loomed, their mill symphony was taking shape, but it remained a secret, a daring act performed in the shadows of the abandoned factory. They needed to unveil it, to make it known, to convince the council and the town that this was the sound of their future, not just their past. But how? The mill was still off limits to the public, and even if they could somehow get the council in, how would they understand the unconventional beauty of this industrial symphony? One evening, as they were packing up, covered in grease and dust, Henderson stopped them. "There's a gathering," he said, his eyes gleaming with a rare intensity. "The town picnic, next Saturday, in the square. Everyone will be there, even the council. That's your chance, boy. Play the mill's song, but you can't bring the mill to them." He paused, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. "But you can bring the sound of the mill." Silas and Clara exchanged a look. Henderson was right. It was a crazy idea, but it was their only shot. They had 2 days. 2 days to find a way to amplify the mill's colossal sound, to record it, and then, somehow, bring it to life in the town square. 2 days to convince Harmony Creek that its own forgotten heartbeat was the most beautiful music of all. But as they looked around the vast, silent mill, the task seemed impossible. How could they capture a sound that needed acres of industrial space to truly resonate? And what if, even then, the town refused to listen? The weight of expectation, the pressure of their rapidly vanishing time, pressed down on them, threatening to crush their fragile hope. The idea was audacious, bordering on insane. capture the raw, colossal music of the abandoned mill and unleash it upon the unsuspecting town square. 2 days. That's all they had. The clock was ticking, each second a hammer blow against their dwindling hope. Silas felt the familiar dread of impending failure, but Elias's quiet conviction and Clara's fierce optimism were infectious. This wasn't just about the playhouse anymore. It was about honoring the mill's legacy, the town's very soul. "How in the world do we record a place this big?" Clara asked, her voice echoing in the vastness of the mill, her gaze sweeping from the towering looms to the grimy walls. "We don't have professional equipment, Silas. And even if we did, where would we play it back? The old bandstand barely has working electricity." Silas, ever the pragmatist, was already mentally ticking off problems. "Henderson, do you know anything about the mill's old power systems? Could we temporarily tap into an old generator, just enough for some recording equipment?" Henderson, a man of surprising hidden talents, nodded slowly. "There's an old diesel generator in the basement, rarely used. Might still have some juice in it if we can get it primed. But it'll be noisy." Noise was exactly what they needed. The next frantic day saw them scavenging. Clara managed to borrow a few decent microphones and a portable recording interface from a sympathetic, if skeptical, colleague at a neighboring school. Silas, using his old connections, located a set of powerful, albeit dusty, outdoor speakers once used for town events, promising their swift return with a hefty dose of desperate charm. The greatest challenge, however, was power. The diesel generator was a beast, reluctant to awaken. Henderson spent hours coaxing it, his face streaked with grease, until finally, with a roar and a plume of black smoke, it sputtered to life. The vibration pulsed through the floor, a guttural heartbeat for their makeshift recording studio. As the sun began to set on Friday, the eve of the town picnic, they were ready. Elias stood amidst the colossal machinery, his small figure dwarfed by the industrial giants. Clara positioned the microphone strategically, capturing the deep resonant thrums of the looms, the high-pitched metallic squeals of newly oiled pulleys, the rhythmic clanging of chains, and the ghostly sighs of the wind whistling through broken windows. Elias, with his flute, provided the melodic heart, weaving his lament and hope through the cacophony. It was a grueling process. Each sound needed to be perfectly timed, layered, and balanced. Henderson, overseeing it all, occasionally offered a cryptic nod of approval or a gruff instruction. The hours melted away, fueled by stale coffee and an almost feverish determination. By midnight, they had it, a raw, powerful, and utterly unique piece of music. It was the mill's song, distilled into a tangible recording, a testament to Harmony Creek's past and a plea for its future. The following morning dawned bright and clear, the air buzzing with the excitement of the annual town picnic. Food trucks lined the square, children chased each other, and laughter for once filled the usually quiet space. The council members, including Sterling Finch, were there, mingling, shaking hands, and radiating an air of self-importance. The mayor was giving his opening address from the main gazebo, a rambling speech about community spirit and fiscal responsibility. Silas, Clara, and Elias stood on the old bandstand, their makeshift sound system barely hidden behind faded banners. The borrowed speakers looked impossibly small against the vastness of the square. Nervous energy hummed between them. This was it, their final desperate gamble. "Are you ready, Elias?" Clara whispered, her hand trembling slightly as she held the ancient wooden flute. Elias nodded, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, a mix of old Harmony Creek faces and newer, unfamiliar ones. His family was there, huddled together near the back, their faces a mix of anxiety and quiet hope. He took a deep breath. Silas, who had managed to subtly plug in their equipment while the mayor was distracted, stepped forward. He caught Mayor Jenkins's eye, who gave him a polite, if bewildered, nod. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the festivities," Silas announced, his voice booming unexpectedly through the borrowed speakers, momentarily silencing the chatter. "We have a special presentation, something that speaks to the very soul of Harmony Creek, a collaboration between our past and our future." Sterling Finch, from his position by the BBQ pit, rolled his eyes, clearly expecting another quaint flute performance. He leaned in to whisper something dismissive to Councilwoman Vance, who simply stared, intrigued, at the bandstand. Silas pressed play. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low, guttural thrum vibrated through the air, seemingly rising from the very ground beneath their feet. It was deep, resonant, and utterly unexpected. The conversations died. Heads turned. Children stopped playing, their eyes wide. The thrum built, a powerful rhythmic pulse that filled the square, vibrating through chests, rattling windows. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical presence. Then the clanging began, the scraping, the whirring of gears, all layered into a complex, driving beat. It was raw, industrial, primal, yet undeniably musical. It was the sound of the mill, alive again, speaking its story to a town that had forgotten how to listen. Faces in the crowd shifted from confusion to curiosity, then to something akin to awe. They heard the echoes of their grandfather's labor, the rhythm that had shaped their town. And then, above the industrial symphony, Elias began to play. His flute, clear and pure, soared through the air, weaving a melody of profound beauty and melancholy. It was the song of his grandmother, infused with the heartbeat of Harmony Creek. The contrast was breathtaking, the immense power of the mill providing a foundation for the fragile, soulful cry of the flute. It was the voice of the new generation blending with the echoes of the old, creating a harmony that transcended words. The square was utterly silent, save for the music. Faces were transfixed. Old-timers had tears in their eyes, recognizing the familiar long-lost rhythms. New residents, including Elias's family, listened with a newfound pride, seeing their quiet, shy boy command the attention of an entire town. Sterling Finch, his mouth agape, slowly lowered the half-eaten hot dog he had been holding. Mayor Jenkins, who had been about to resume his speech, simply stood, motionless, his face a mask of profound shock and unexpected emotion. As the piece reached its climax, a swirling crescendo of industrial might and human spirit, Elias's flute sang its final soaring notes, a triumphant declaration of hope. The mill's heartbeat faded into a lingering hum, leaving the square in a silence that was even more potent than before. Then, a single clap broke the stillness, then another, and another. Soon, a wave of applause, hesitant at first, then thunderous, erupted through the square. People were on their feet, cheering, whistling. They were crying. They were laughing. They were, finally, listening. Silas looked at Clara, a triumphant, almost disbelieving smile spreading across his face. Clara, her eyes shining, squeezed Elias's hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. Elias, looking out at the cheering crowd, felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling of belonging he hadn't known since arriving in Harmony Creek. The music had connected them all. But as the applause slowly began to subside, Mayor Jenkins, his face still stunned, slowly made his way to the bandstand. He looked at Silas, then at Elias, a complex mix of awe and worry in his eyes. He cleared his throat, the sound magnified by the speakers. Silas, Clara, Elias, he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. What you've done, it's truly remarkable. But this doesn't change the fact that the playhouse itself is still structurally unsound. And there's a new problem, a big problem. He paused, his gaze hardening slightly. Sterling Finch just received an emergency permit for the immediate demolition of the Old Mill Playhouse. It's scheduled for dawn, Monday morning. The words hit them like a physical blow. Their triumph, their moment of connection, suddenly felt utterly fragile, teetering on the brink of absolute despair. Dawn, Monday morning. They had less than 48 hours. Their music had moved hearts. But could it stop a wrecking ball? The celebratory applause in Harmony Creek Square died an abrupt, chilling death with Mayor Jenkins's pronouncement. Dawn, Monday morning. Less than 48 hours until the Old Mill Playhouse, the heart of their fragile hope, would be reduced to rubble. The air, which moments ago had vibrated with music and newfound unity, now crackled with fear and a profound sense of injustice. The joyous faces in the crowd morphed into expressions of shock and disbelief. Sterling Finch, a smug, triumphant grin now plastered across his face, emerged from the crowd, making a beeline for the bandstand. An emergency permit, Mayor? Really? He declared, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. The building is a hazard. It's been deemed unsafe for decades. This isn't about music. It's about public safety and fiscal responsibility. The developer's ready to move. This is a done deal. Silas felt a surge of cold fury. Finch's timing was not only calculated but cruel, designed to deflate their victory just as it soared. An emergency permit? After what everyone just heard? After seeing this town come alive? Sterling, this is nothing but a spiteful power play. It's simply following protocol, Silas. Finch sneered, his eyes glinting. The structural reports are all there. The building is beyond repair. And frankly, this performance, while moderately entertaining, changes nothing. It doesn't magically make the playhouse safe, nor does it suddenly produce $1 million to fix it. Reality, Silas, is a much harsher tune. Clara stepped forward, her face pale but her eyes blazing with indignation. This is our reality, Councilman. This music, this community coming together. This is what Harmony Creek needs. Not another soulless recreation center where history is erased. Elias, still on the bandstand, felt a profound emptiness settle over him. The powerful connection he had just made with the town, the glimpse of belonging, now felt illusory, snatched away by the cold hand of bureaucracy. His flute, which had just sung with such hope, now felt heavy and silent in his hands. Mayor Jenkins, clearly uncomfortable with the public confrontation, raised a conciliatory hand. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. The permit is provisional, but it is legitimate. We can discuss this further in chambers, Silas. Tomorrow morning, at 9 sharp. Council members only. He shot Finch a pointed look. No more grandstanding, Sterling. Finch merely smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. He knew he had the upper hand. The emergency permit, no doubt pushed through with his influence, made the playhouse's demolition almost inevitable. As the crowd slowly dispersed, their festive mood utterly shattered, Silas, Clara, and Elias found themselves standing alone on the bandstand, the lingering echoes of the mill's music now sounding like a tragic dirge. "Council members only?" Clara exclaimed, frustration bubbling over. "He's trying to shut us out, Silas. Finch will have the mayor's ear and the whole thing will be rubber-stamped." "Not if we don't let it," Silas said, his jaw set. He looked at Elias, then at Clara. "We moved them once. We can do it again. We need a plan. Something radical. Something that forces them to listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts." The rest of Saturday and all of Sunday were a blur of desperate strategizing. They knew they couldn't appeal to logic or finances. They had no money, no powerful legal team. Their only weapon was emotion, connection, and the sheer human will to resist. "We need to rally the town," Clara declared, her voice hoarse from endless discussion. "Everyone who felt something today. Everyone who wants to save the playhouse. We need to show the council that this isn't just Silas's project. It's Harmony Creek's dream." Silas paced the floor of Clara's living room. A map of Harmony Creek spread across the coffee table, an urgent energy thrumming beneath his weariness. "Finch isn't just fighting us. He's fighting the spirit of this town. He's fighting its history. What if we use that history against him? What if we turn the playhouse for one last night into a symbol of everything he wants to destroy?" Elias, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke, his voice soft but firm. "My grandmother used to say, 'When the spirit is strong, stones can speak.' What if we make the playhouse speak?" An idea, reckless and daring, began to form in Silas's mind. "The permit states demolition for dawn, Monday, but it doesn't say anything about a public gathering before dawn, does it? What if we hold a vigil, a peaceful demonstration, a concert, at the playhouse, tonight?" Clara's eyes widened. "Tonight? That's barely 12 hours away, and we're locked out." "Henderson," Silas said, a knowing look in his eyes. "He knows the playhouse as well as he knows the mill. There has to be another way in, a back door, a forgotten window. We need to get in there. We need to get that old piano ready. And Elias, you need to play." The plan was a whirlwind of frantic preparations. Henderson, with his master key that seemed to unlock every forgotten corner of Harmony Creek, found a way into the playhouse through a disused boiler room in the basement. They stealthily moved their borrowed sound equipment from the town square to the playhouse. They didn't have time for major repairs, but they could clean, illuminate, and set the stage for one last, defiant stand. Clara and a handful of her students, their faces grimly determined, spread the word. Phone calls, texts, a hastily printed flyer passed hand to hand. "Save the playhouse! Vigil and concert! Tonight, 10 p.m. Be there!" The urgency was palpable. This was their last chance. As night fell over Harmony Creek, a strange tension settled over the town. The usual quiet was replaced by an undercurrent of nervous anticipation. Would anyone come? Or would apathy, Finch's most powerful ally, win in the end? By 9:30 p.m., a small, diverse crowd began to gather outside the playhouse. Old-timers, clutching blankets, stood alongside young families and the new residents, Elias's family among them. The atmosphere was somber but determined. They weren't a mob, but a community, united by a fragile hope. Inside, the playhouse glowed faintly with hastily strung fairy lights and battery-powered lanterns. The old piano, cleaned and dusted, sat center stage, a silent sentinel. Elias took his place on the bench, his heart thrumming with a mixture of fear and resolve. Clara stood by him, a fierce protector. Silas, watching the growing crowd from a side window, felt a surge of pride, tinged with gnawing anxiety. At 10 p.m., Silas stepped onto the stage, the soft glow illuminating his determined face. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "We are here tonight for one purpose, to remind ourselves and our council what Harmony Creek truly stands for. This building is more than wood and stone. It is our story. And tonight, Elias will tell that story. One last time on this stage." He gestured to Elias. The boy took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the yellowed keys. He felt the weight of every gaze, every hope, every desperate prayer in the room. He looked at Clara, then at his family, then out at the shadows of the playhouse, filled with the presence of generations. He knew what he had to do. He had to play a melody so undeniable, so steeped in the soul of Harmony Creek, that it would force the council, and especially Sterling Finch, to face their conscience. But as his fingers finally touched the keys, he felt a sudden sharp tremor. He wasn't just playing for the town anymore. He was playing against the clock. And he knew with a chilling certainty that Finch would not let this stand. He would try to stop them. The question was when and how. Elias's fingers, trembling initially, found their anchor on the worn ivory keys of the old mill playhouse piano. The first notes that emerged were fragile, tentative, a quiet lament echoing through the hushed auditorium. But it was a sound imbued with every desperate hope, every unspoken prayer of the people gathered there. He wasn't just playing a song. He was breathing life into a dying dream. The crowd, a diverse tapestry of Harmony Creek's past and present, listened with a reverence that transcended the simple act of hearing music. They heard the sorrow of their town's decline, the longing for its former vibrancy, and the cautious, hopeful whispers of a shared future. Elias's melody, weaving between the traditional folk tunes of the region and the haunting, ancient scales of his own heritage, created a tapestry of sound that was both deeply familiar and utterly new. It spoke of resilience, of the enduring human spirit, and of the power of connection. Clara stood beside Elias, her gaze sweeping over the faces in the audience. She saw tears streaming down the weathered cheeks of old Mrs. Albright, who had attended every play in the playhouse since she was a girl. She saw young mothers holding their children close, their expressions a mix of wonder and understanding. And she saw Elias's family, their faces alight with pride, their silence a profound testament to the unspoken stories his music carried. This wasn't just a concert. It was a reaffirmation of identity, a defiant cry against oblivion. Silas, standing at the back, felt a surge of emotion so powerful it threatened to buckle his knees. This was what Harmony Creek had lost, and what it desperately needed to rediscover. He watched the faces, illuminated by the soft glow of the fairy lights, and knew that Finch's cold, hard numbers stood no chance against the raw, pulsing heart of this moment. But he also knew Finch wouldn't sit idly by. The emergency demolition permit was a declaration of war, and Silas was bracing for the inevitable counterattack. Suddenly, a loud banging erupted from the main doors of the playhouse, rattling the old wood and sending a collective gasp through the audience. The music faltered for a brief, terrifying second. Elias's fingers stiffened. The spell was broken. "Open up, Harmony Creek Building Authority. This building is condemned. You are trespassing." The booming voice of Sterling Finch, amplified by a bullhorn, cut through the night, echoing through the thin walls of the playhouse. A ripple of panic spread through the crowd. Some began to stand, looking towards the commotion, fear etching lines on their faces. Clara rushed to the stage edge, her heart pounding. "Don't stop, Elias," she urged, her voice fierce. "Keep playing." Elias, though his hands trembled, forced himself to focus. He closed his eyes, drawing strength from the melody, from the feeling of the keys beneath his fingers. He poured all his fear, all his hope, all his defiance into the music. The melody swelled, regaining its strength, a desperate, beautiful counterpoint to Finch's harsh pronouncements. Outside Finch, flanked by two burly security guards, men Silas recognized as rent-a-cops from the developer's private security firm, banged harder on the door. He was furious, his face red with rage that his carefully orchestrated plans were being thwarted by a boy and a piano. "You are in violation of multiple municipal codes. Disperse immediately, or we will be forced to take action." Silas moved quickly, pulling Henderson aside. "Is there any way to secure that back entrance we used? Can we barricade it from the inside, even temporarily?" Henderson, his eyes glinting with a familiar stubbornness, nodded. "Aye. Got some old timber down in the basement. Won't hold forever, but it'll buy us time." He disappeared into the shadows, a man on a mission. Meanwhile, Clara, thinking fast, grabbed a small, portable microphone they had brought for recording. "Everyone!" she yelled, her voice resonating through the playhouse. "This is what they want. They want to silence us. They want to tear down our history. But we won't let them. We will stand together. We will make our voices heard." She pointed to Elias. "He is playing for all of us. Let his music be our shield." Inspired by her words, the crowd began to settle, their fear slowly giving way to a shared resolve. Some began to hum along to Elias's melody. Others began to clap softly in rhythm, creating a low, pulsing beat that seemed to fortify the very walls of the playhouse. Finch, realizing his bullhorn was being drowned out by the growing defiance within, barked orders at his security guards. "Break it down! Get in there!" The guards began to forcefully shoulder the main doors. The old wood groaned under the assault, splinters flying. The sound was terrifying, a visceral threat to everything they were fighting for. But Elias played on, his melody becoming more urgent, more powerful, a rallying cry for the besieged. Silas, seeing the doors beginning to buckle, knew they were running out of time. He needed to buy Elias more minutes, more seconds for the music to fully take hold. He grabbed a forgotten stage prop, an old, ornate wooden podium, and dragged it towards the main entrance, wedging it against the door, a futile but symbolic act of resistance. "This is our home!" an old woman shouted from the audience, her voice surprisingly strong. "You won't take it from us!" Others echoed her sentiment, a chorus of defiance rising from the crowd, mixing with Elias's urgent music. The standoff intensified. The guards continued their assault on the doors, their grunts and the splintering wood creating a harsh, percussive counterpoint to Elias's piano. Finch, frustrated, pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the sheriff's department," he bellowed, his voice straining. "You are all under arrest for unlawful assembly and obstruction." Clara, hearing this, felt a cold dread. Arrests? That would mean the end. But then she looked at Elias, still playing, his face a mask of concentration, his small frame radiating an astonishing strength. He was a silent conductor, not just of the music, but of the collective will of the town. Just as the main doors seemed on the verge of collapsing, and as the sound of distant sirens began to wail, a figure suddenly appeared in the side entrance, a determined silhouette against the outside light. It was Mayor Jenkins, his face grim, his usually placid demeanor replaced by a look of steely resolve. He held up a hand, silencing the security guards with a single authoritative gesture. "Sterling!" Mayor Jenkins's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and unmistakable. "Stop this immediately. This is a peaceful assembly. You have no authority to order arrests." Finch, taken aback by the mayor's unexpected appearance and his sudden show of force, spluttered. "But Mayor, they're defying a legitimate permit. This building is unsafe." "It will be safe enough for a conversation," Mayor Jenkins countered, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, then landing on Elias, still playing his heart out on the piano. The mayor's eyes held a strange new light, a flicker of understanding. "I want everyone to calm down. The sheriff's deputies are on their way, but I will speak to them personally. No arrests will be made tonight. This is a public meeting, and we will conduct it as such. In here." He looked directly at Silas, then at Clara. "Elias, keep playing." A collective sigh of relief swept through the playhouse. The immediate threat of physical violence had receded, replaced by a tense, precarious truce. Mayor Jenkins, his presence lending an unexpected gravitas, walked to the front of the stage, facing the audience, then turning to look at Finch, who stood, defeated, by the fractured doors. "We have an emergency demolition permit for this building for Monday morning," the mayor stated, his voice now calm and measured, addressing everyone present. "And we have a community, united tonight by a young man's music, telling us in no uncertain terms that this playhouse is not just a building, but the very soul of Harmony Creek. Tonight, we will decide its fate, not in the back rooms of the council, but here, together, in the playhouse with the music." The audience murmured, a mix of hope and renewed apprehension. Elias, encouraged by the mayor's words, let his melody soften, becoming a hopeful plea, a backdrop to the unfolding drama. Finch glared, a venomous look in his eyes, knowing he was losing control. The stage was set, not just for a concert, but for a trial. The future of Harmony Creek, its identity, its spirit, would be decided in this very room, under the gaze of a community finally awakened. And Elias, his fingers still dancing on the keys, knew the most important part of his symphony was yet to be played. He had brought them together. Now he had to keep them there, to hold their hearts captive, even as the first fingers of dawn began to paint the sky outside, bringing with them the threat of the wrecking ball. Mayor Jenkins's unexpected declaration transformed the volatile standoff into an impromptu town hall meeting, held under the ethereal glow of fairy lights and the unwavering strains of Elias's piano. Sterling Finch, though visibly fuming, was trapped. The arrival of the sheriff's deputies, their faces stern but deferential to the mayor's authority, ensured a tense, uneasy peace. The playhouse, teetering on the brink of demolition, now housed a battle for the soul of Harmony Creek. Elias played on, his music no longer a mere performance but the very heartbeat of the deliberation. It was a soft, continuous melody, a backdrop of hope and fragility that underscored every word spoken, every argument made. He was a silent witness, and his music was the town's collective conscience. Mayor Jenkins stood before the makeshift assembly, his gaze firm. Councilman Finch has presented a legitimate demolition permit. He argues for economic sense and public safety, and he has a developer willing to invest significantly in a new recreation center, which, on paper, has merit. He paused, allowing the weight of Finch's arguments to settle. But tonight, something more profound has happened. We have heard the music of our past, present, and potential future. We have seen a community unite. This isn't just about a building, it's about what we value. So I open the floor. Speak your minds. The initial silence was thick with apprehension, but then old Mrs. Albright, her voice raspy but firm, rose from her seat. I remember when this playhouse opened, Mayor. My daddy brought me. It was a grand night. I saw my first play here, had my first dance here. It wasn't just a building. It was where we learned what it meant to be human. To laugh, to cry, to dream. You can't put a price on that. Her words opened the floodgates. One by one, residents rose, their voices filled with emotion. A young woman spoke of performing her first recital on this very stage, a moment of courage that shaped her life. A father spoke of wanting his children to have a place to explore their creativity, a space free from the screens that dominated their lives. Then, a voice spoke from the back, hesitant but clear. It was Elias's father, a quiet, dignified man who rarely spoke English. He stood, his eyes fixed on his son, and in broken but heartfelt words, he spoke of how Elias had found a voice here, how the music had given him purpose, how it had connected his family to this new land. Each testimony was a poignant arrow aimed at the heart of Finch's practicality. The playhouse, it became clear, was a repository of shared memories, a crucible of identity. It was where Harmony Creek had learned to express itself, to bond, to simply be. Sterling Finch, however, remained unmoved. He stepped forward, seizing his moment. Sentiment is a luxury, Mayor, especially for a town in our economic situation. What about the jobs, the new tax revenue, the modern facilities that will benefit everyone? This is about progress, not clinging to ghosts. He gestured dismissively at the crumbling walls. This building is a liability, a drain. It's a symbol of what's gone wrong in Harmony Creek, not what's right. His words, sharp and cynical, momentarily chilled the air, threatening to deflate the rising hope. Some in the crowd looked down, acknowledging the harsh truth of their town's economic struggles. But Silas, seeing the wavering confidence, knew he had to act. He stepped forward, his eyes locked with Finch's. Sterling, this playhouse isn't a ghost. It's a beating heart. And if we tear it down, we're not just losing a building. We're losing a piece of ourselves. We're telling every child, every newcomer, every artist that their dreams aren't valuable, that only what's practical truly matters. He paused, then turned to the mayor. Mayor Jenkins, we're not asking for $1 million. We're asking for a chance to show that this playhouse, powered by the spirit of this community, can thrive. We have a program, Clara's vision, Elias's talent, and we have the will. Give us an extension. Give us 6 months. Let us prove that a vibrant arts center can generate its own funding, can become a beacon for this town, not just a drain. Finch scoffed. 6 months? More empty promises. And how exactly would you fund this beacon? You have no business plan, no substantial donations, just a boy and a piano. It was a devastating point. The hope in the room began to dwindle. Even Clara looked worried, knowing the insurmountable financial hurdle. Then, Elias, who had been playing a particularly sorrowful passage, slowly lifted his hands from the keys. The music ceased, leaving an abrupt, profound silence in the room. Every eye turned to him. His face, usually shy and withdrawn, was now filled with an astonishing resolve. The mill, Elias said, his voice quiet but clear, carrying through the sudden silence. The mill has sounds, powerful sounds. Old, new, Harmony Creek. We can use it. Mayor Jenkins looked at Elias, then at Silas, confusion etched on his face. The mill? What about the mill, son? Clara stepped forward, her heart racing, picking up Elias's thread. Mayor, council, what you heard in the square today was only a recording. Elias has created an entire symphony from the sounds of the old mill. He has found a way to use its machinery, its very bones, to create a powerful, unique musical experience. We believe this mill symphony can be our flagship. We can create an immersive performance, a one-of-a-kind event that draws people from all over the region. She looked at Silas, who quickly caught her meaning. And we can perform it in the mill itself, Mayor. It's a vast, powerful space, a perfect, raw, industrial stage. It would be an unforgettable, ticketed event. An experience that celebrates Harmony Creek's industrial heritage while embracing its new artistic future. It would be a huge draw. We could use the proceeds to begin the playhouse renovations, to fund Clara's programs, to prove that this isn't just a dream, but a viable, self-sustaining future. The idea, audacious and utterly unexpected, stunned the room into silence. The mill, long considered a symbol of decay, reimagined as a cultural venue? It was an unheard-of proposition. Mayor Jenkins's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine interest replacing his earlier weariness. Finch, however, quickly recovered. That's preposterous. The mill is even more dangerous than the playhouse. It's a liability, a lawsuit waiting to happen. We'll get it inspected, Silas countered quickly, his mind racing, already envisioning the possibilities. Henderson, Elias, and I have been in there for weeks. We know the safe zones. We'll make it secure. We'll make it an experience. It's the ultimate statement, Mayor. The heartbeat of Harmony Creek, played on its original instrument, for all the world to hear. Mayor Jenkins looked around the room, at the expectant faces, at the sheriff's deputies still standing by, at Sterling Finch, who was now truly at a loss for words. Then, his gaze landed on Elias, whose quiet strength had, against all odds, ignited a spark where only ashes remained. "All right," the mayor finally said, his voice ringing with a newfound conviction. "No demolition, not yet. We will table the demolition permit, for now. Silas, Clara, Elias, you have 6 months. 6 months to organize this mill symphony. 6 months to prove that Harmony Creek can reimagine its past for a vibrant future. 6 months to show us this can work, that it can generate revenue, that it can revitalize this town. If you succeed, the playhouse is safe, and we will work with you on its restoration. If you fail..." He didn't need to finish. Failure meant the wrecking ball would return, inevitably. A collective cheer erupted from the audience, a wave of triumphant relief washing over the playhouse. Elias, feeling the weight of the moment, felt a profound sense of purpose. 6 months, a huge victory, but an even bigger challenge. He knew Finch wouldn't give up. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. And as the mayor left, promising to meet with them first thing in the morning to discuss the details, Elias looked at the shattered main doors, the evidence of Finch's violent attempt to silence them. He knew the councilman would be plotting his next move. A powerful, desperate fear gnawed at him. What if Finch didn't fight them in the council chambers, but in the shadows, where their fragile dream was most vulnerable? He had a terrible feeling that Finch's next move would be far more insidious and far more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. Mayor Jenkins's decision to grant a 6-month reprieve for the playhouse, contingent on the success of the Mill Symphony, sent a ripple of hope through Harmony Creek. But for Elias, Clara, and Silas, it was less a victory and more the beginning of a relentless, high-stakes race against time. The initial exhilaration of their reprieve quickly faded, replaced by the daunting reality of their colossal task. 6 months to transform an abandoned, condemned mill into a performance venue capable of drawing a regional audience. Sterling Finch's fury, barely contained during the mayor's announcement, was a palpable threat. Elias, still haunted by Finch's attempts to break down the playhouse doors, couldn't shake the premonition of darker, more insidious tactics to come. He knew Finch wouldn't confront them openly again, not after the public humiliation. No, Finch would move in the shadows. Their fear proved prophetic just days later. Elias, accustomed to his solitary morning treks to the mill, found a new, unsettling presence. He saw strange vehicles parked near the mill's perimeter, men in work uniforms he didn't recognize, surveying the grounds. They carried clipboards, their faces grim, their movements furtive. When he asked them what they were doing, they merely grunted, refusing to answer, their eyes hard and dismissive. He reported it to Silas and Clara, his voice laced with a newfound anxiety. They were watching, like they were waiting for something. Silas's jaw tightened. Finch, he's found another angle. He's not going to let us secure that mill without a fight. A quick investigation confirmed their fears. Finch, through a shell corporation linked to the developer, had quietly purchased a small, neglected plot of land adjacent to the mill. This gave them a legal foothold, a legitimate reason to be near the property, and what they were doing there was deeply unsettling. Drilling, surveying, conducting environmental tests. He's looking for something, anything, to declare the mill unstable, Silas explained, pacing Clara's small office. The maps of the mill and the surrounding property spread out before them. Groundwater contamination, structural weaknesses, anything that would make it impossible to use as a public venue. If he can prove it's too dangerous or too costly to make safe, our whole plan collapses. The pressure mounted, a suffocating weight. Every day they spent battling Finch's tactics was a day not spent preparing the mill symphony. They needed engineers, environmental experts, lawyers, resources they simply didn't have. But the community, finally awakened, began to rally. Old Mr. Henderson, with his intimate knowledge of the mill, became their eyes and ears on the ground, reporting every suspicious activity. Local residents, outraged by Finch's blatant obstruction, started a petition, demanding transparency from the council. Meanwhile, Elias, despite the encroaching shadows, continued to compose, to orchestrate. He spent hours in the mill, meticulously mapping out soundscapes, assigning roles to the massive machinery. He found new, hidden instruments, abandoned tools, forgotten pipes, even the cavernous, empty spaces themselves. Clara, tirelessly, began to assemble their orchestra, a motley crew of willing volunteers. Former mill workers, young artists, and even some of the new residents, shy at first, began to come forward, drawn by the music and the sense of purpose. One afternoon, as Clara was rehearsing a percussive section with a group of volunteers, using scrap metal and mallets, Elias noticed something peculiar. The ground near the massive central loom, the heartbeat of their symphony, felt strangely soft, almost spongy. He had often played there, feeling the vibrations through the floor. Now there was a subtle dampness, a faint metallic odor he couldn't quite place. He showed it to Henderson, whose face immediately paled. "Rust," Henderson muttered, his eyes tracing the floorboards. "Old pipelines. They used to run solvents, chemicals, through these pipes. If they're leaking, oh Lord, if they're leaking." The realization hit them like a thunderbolt. Finch wasn't just looking for problems. He might be creating them. A leaking pipeline, especially one carrying old industrial chemicals, would indeed render the mill utterly unusable, a toxic wasteland. This was more than a technicality. It was an environmental disaster waiting to happen, potentially endangering the entire town's water supply. The stakes had just skyrocketed. Silas, upon hearing the news, felt a cold dread clamp around his heart. This is it. This is his endgame. If he can prove environmental contamination, not only is the mill symphony dead, but the town will likely condemn the entire area around the mill, possibly even forcing relocation for Elias's family and others living nearby. They needed an environmental expert, and they needed one fast. But Finch had already planted his seeds of doubt. The local council, already wary, would easily side with Finch's evidence. They were facing an enemy who was not only ruthless, but strategically brilliant. Clara, however, refused to surrender. We have to find our own expert, someone impartial, someone who cares more about the truth than about political favors. She began frantically calling universities, environmental groups, anyone who would listen to their desperate plea. Most were too busy, too expensive, or too unwilling to get involved in a local political battle. Time was running out. The 6-month deadline felt like it was accelerating, each day bringing them closer to either triumph or utter ruin. Elias, observing Finch's team drilling closer and closer to the mill's main support structures, felt a profound despair. He knew that the mill, his sanctuary, his instrument, was under attack, and with it, the only hope his family had found in Harmony Creek. One evening, Silas received an anonymous phone call. A hushed, urgent voice warned him. Finch's team. They're going in tonight. Midnight. They're planning to sabotage the main generator. Make it look like an accident. If that goes, the whole power grid for that section of town could be compromised. And the blame, it'll fall on your unlicensed activities. The threat was clear. Not just sabotage, but an attempt to frame them, to destroy their credibility and their chance to ever operate in the mill. This wasn't just about saving a building anymore. It was about protecting their reputations, their freedom, and the fragile trust they had painstakingly built within the community. Silas, Clara, and Elias knew they couldn't go to the sheriff without proof. Finch was too well connected. They had to catch him or his men in the act. The stakes had escalated from a cultural battle to a dangerous, high-tension confrontation. They decided to stake out the mill that very night, a desperate, perilous vigil in the encroaching darkness. As midnight approached, they hid in the shadows surrounding the old mill, the air thick with tension and the damp scent of unseen danger. The moon, a sliver of silver, barely illuminated the ominous silhouette of the factory. Every creak of the old building, every rustle of leaves, sent shivers down their spines. Elias clutched his flute, his heart pounding, a silent prayer forming in his mind. He was no longer just a musician. He was a guardian, standing watch over the beating heart of his new home. He knew that if Finch succeeded tonight, not only would the playhouse be lost, but Harmony Creek itself would fall prey to the cynical forces that sought to strip it of its very soul. He peered into the inky blackness, waiting for the shadows to move, knowing that one wrong step could mean the end of everything. The old mill breathed around them, a sleeping leviathan under the sliver of moon. Every creak of rusting metal, every distant rustle of leaves sharpened Elias's senses, his heart thrumming a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He clutched his flute, its smooth wood a cold comfort in the humid night air. Beside him, Clara gripped Silas's arm, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the main mill gate. This wasn't a rehearsal or a concert. It was a desperate vigil, a confrontation that would decide not just the fate of the playhouse, but the very soul of Harmony Creek. Minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of an unseen clock amplifying the tension. Then a low rumble broke the silence. A beat-up van, its headlights dark, slowly crept down the overgrown access road, its tires crunching on gravel. It stopped a short distance from the mill's main entrance. 3 shadowy figures emerged, their movements swift and purposeful. They carried toolboxes, and in the faint moonlight, Elias could see the glint of what looked like heavy-duty cutting tools. "They're here," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. Silas, his own heart pounding, nodded grimly. "Stay hidden. We need to catch them in the act. Henderson, you're ready?" Mr. Henderson, who had positioned himself closer to the back generator room, gave a barely perceptible nod, a glint of fierce determination in his aged eyes. He had a deep personal connection to this mill, and he wouldn't see it intentionally defiled. The figures moved like ghosts through the abandoned factory, heading directly for the generator room. Elias watched, his fear morphing into a cold, hard resolve. This wasn't just about sabotaging a machine. It was about destroying hope. He tightened his grip on his flute. Just as the men began to pry open the heavy, rusted door to the generator room, Silas stepped out of the shadows, his voice cutting through the night. "All right, gentlemen, that's far enough." The men froze, startled. One of them dropped a crowbar with a loud clang that echoed through the mill. They spun around, their faces obscured by the darkness, but their startled, aggressive posture was clear. "Who the hell are you?" one of them snarled, stepping forward, his hand instinctively reaching for something in his belt. Clara emerged then, her small frame surprisingly defiant. "We know why you're here, and we have witnesses." Elias, seeing their vulnerability, decided a witness wasn't enough. He raised his flute to his lips and played. Not a melody, not a gentle tune, but a high-pitched, piercing wail that resonated with the eerie echoes of the mill. It was the sound of an alarm, a desperate cry that cut through the night, designed to draw attention, to unsettle, to delay. The men flinched, disoriented by the unexpected sound. It gave Silas the crucial seconds he needed. "Sheriff's deputies are on their way," Silas shouted, a bluff, but one he hoped would buy them time. "We have everything on record. You're caught." Just then, Henderson, fueled by a lifetime of loyalty to the mill, emerged from the generator room itself, a rusty, wrench-like tool in his hand. "You ain't touching this machinery," he rasped, his voice surprisingly strong, his eyes blazing. "You want to fight for this mill? You fight an old man first." The men hesitated, clearly not expecting such resistance. They were hired muscle, not hardened criminals, and the sight of an old man, a young woman, and a boy with a flute wasn't what they signed up for. But their employer's instructions had been clear. No witnesses, no interference. Suddenly, the lead thug lunged for Silas, a desperate move to silence him. Clara screamed, but before he could reach Silas, a bright flash of light erupted from the darkness, followed by the sharp click of a camera shutter. "Smile for the camera, boys!" a familiar voice bellowed. It was Mrs. Albright, standing at the mill's entrance, not alone, but with a dozen other townspeople, all armed with cell phones and determined expressions. They had been tipped off by Clara's network, arriving just in time. The thugs faltered, their eyes wide with panic. They were caught, exposed. The last thing they wanted was their faces all over social media, linked to a botched sabotage attempt. "Get out of here!" the lead thug yelled, pushing his accomplices towards the van. They scrambled inside, the tires squealing as they sped away, disappearing into the night. A wave of relief washed over Elias, so profound it almost buckled his knees. They were safe. The mill was safe. But the fight wasn't over. They still needed definitive proof of Finch's true intentions, not just a foiled sabotage. "Henderson?" Silas urged, his voice urgent. "Did they do anything? Anything at all to the generator?" Henderson, surprisingly spry, quickly inspected the generator. "They didn't get to the main power, no. But look here." He pointed to a section of rusty piping that ran beneath the generator. It was old, brittle, and clearly marked with a hazardous chemical symbol. A small, almost invisible crack had appeared, and a faint, metallic-smelling dampness clung to the floor. They tampered with the drainage valve, loosened it. It wouldn't have caused a leak right away, but over a few days, slow corrosion. They wanted to make it look like the mill itself was falling apart, leaking toxins into the soil. Environmental disaster, they'd say. No more mill, no more playhouse. It was brilliant, insidious, and utterly damning. Not a sudden explosive act, but a slow, creeping poison that would subtly condemn the entire area. Just as Silas was about to call the sheriff with the indisputable evidence, the sound of sirens, this time for real, pierced the night. Mayor Jenkins, his face grim, stepped out of the first sheriff's car, followed by Councilwoman Vance. His eyes scanned the group, then landed on the damaged valve and the small, ominous puddle. "Silas, Clara, Elias, what exactly happened here?" the mayor asked, his voice low, filled with a tension that was palpable. Silas quickly explained, showing the mayor the tampered valve, the faint chemical residue, and the photographic evidence of Finch's men speeding away, captured by Mrs. Albright. Henderson corroborated the technical details, explaining the precise, malicious intent behind the accident. Mayor Jenkins listened, his face hardening with each revelation. Councilwoman Vance gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. This wasn't just politics. This was criminal. Finch had crossed a line, a morally repugnant line that threatened the health and safety of the very community he was sworn to protect. "Sterling Finch has been playing a dangerous game for too long," Mayor Jenkins finally stated, his voice ringing with a new authority, using scare tactics, financial pressure, and now, outright sabotage and environmental endangerment. This will not stand. He turned to the sheriff. "Sheriff, I want a full investigation, and Councilman Finch is to be suspended immediately, pending official inquiry. This is a matter for the authorities, not just town council." A wave of quiet triumph, mixed with profound relief, swept through the assembled townspeople. Finch's reign of cynical self-interest was over. The silence that followed was filled not with despair, but with a growing sense of shared victory, a renewed belief in their collective power. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Finch's schemes were exposed, his reputation shattered. The developer, wary of the negative publicity and pending investigations, withdrew his offer. The mill, once a target for demolition, was now seen as a symbol of Harmony Creek's resilience, its industrial heart ready to beat again with a new, artistic purpose. The 6-month deadline remained, but now it was a challenge they faced together, as a truly united community. Volunteers poured in, offering their skills and time to help clean and secure the mill, to prepare it for the Mill Symphony. Donations, small but steady, began to trickle in, spurred by the renewed faith in their town's future. Clara's music program flourished, attracting new students, both young and old, from every corner of Harmony Creek. Elias, no longer the shy, withdrawn boy, became a quiet leader, his music a beacon of hope, his story a testament to the power of a single, unheard melody to awaken a sleeping town. As for the old mill playhouse, its fate was sealed not by a wrecking ball, but by the hands of a determined community. With the proceeds from the highly anticipated Mill Symphony, a triumphant success that drew crowds from far and wide, they began its careful, loving restoration. Elias, now hailed as a prodigy, composed new pieces, weaving the industrial sounds of the mill with the classic melodies of the playhouse, creating a unique sound that truly embodied Harmony Creek's fusion of past and future. 1 year later, the playhouse reopened its doors, not with a grand, expensive ceremony, but with a simple, heartfelt community concert. Elias sat at the freshly restored piano, its keys gleaming, the stage lights illuminating his confident, peaceful smile. He looked at Silas, standing proudly in the wings, his face etched with pride and a rare, genuine joy. He looked at Clara, now the director of a thriving community arts program, her eyes shining with fulfilled purpose. He looked out at the full house, a sea of familiar faces and new ones, all united, all listening. He began to play. It was the same melody he had played that first, terrifying day, the one his grandmother had taught him. But now it was fuller, richer, imbued with the echoes of the mill, the strength of a community, and the profound, undeniable harmony of a town that had found its soul again. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this was just the beginning. The music of Harmony Creek would never be silenced again. It was a testament to how one boy's unwavering spirit, one forgotten melody, and one moment of impossible courage could transform a town, proving that some dreams are simply too beautiful to let die. And so, the quiet strength of Elias, the unwavering belief of Clara, and the steadfast determination of Silas not only saved a historic building, but reignited the very soul of Harmony Creek. This story reminds us that true change often begins not with grand gestures, but with the courage to listen to the unheard, to see potential where others see only decay. It teaches us that our past is not a burden to be discarded, but a foundation upon which a vibrant future can be built, especially when infused with new voices and fresh perspectives. We learn that cynicism can be a powerful force, but it is no match for the collective heart of a community awakened by shared purpose and the universal language of human connection. Harmony Creek discovered that its true wealth lay not in forgotten factories or old buildings, but in the dreams of its children, the wisdom of its elders, and the boundless power of a song played from the heart. What seemingly impossible dream are you being called to protect in your own life? Remember the courage of Harmony Creek. If this story touched your heart and inspired you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. Thank you for listening.